Hey everyone, welcome to the Wake Up Podcast, a teaching ministry of Awaken Church here in Niskayuna, New York. My name is Eric Dewald. I serve as the lead pastor of Awaken, and today we're going to be asking the question, does it matter what we believe? It's an important question for us to ask. Does it even matter what we believe? We're going to be spending a lot of time on this podcast clarifying, explaining, and at times even defending what Christians believe and why they believe what they believe. And so I think it's probably worth just simply starting with the question, does it even matter what we believe? Is that something that we should spend time doing? I mean, after all, there's all kinds of practical, real world pressing needs that we have to face in this life. We have questions about our relationships, questions about marriage, questions about raising children. How do we navigate our expenses? How do we navigate debt? How do we address matters of health and diet and exercise? All of these questions are really important. So why would we spend time focusing on what we believe? I'm curious what you think about this. Do you think it's important to really spend time thinking and thinking clearly about what it is that you believe? Why should we spend time doing this? I think there's also this notion today that the beliefs tend to divide us rather than unify us. So why would we spend time on something that divides us? All of this is important stuff for us to wrestle with. Now, I think it's important to just start off by noting that we live in a time when traditional religious beliefs hold far less authority than they used to. We live in a pluralistic age, meaning that there are a variety of religious options available to you, and you're free to choose between them. You can be religious or not religious. It doesn't really matter on a societal level. You're free to choose between these varying belief systems. If you want to, you can be a Methodist. You can be Catholic, you could be Muslim, you could be Hindu, you could be Unitarian, you cannot be religious at all. You're free to choose between those options. You can even kind of pick and choose between them and take like an a la carte approach to spirituality. But regardless, the idea in our day and age is that you're to act cooperatively, that you're to engage in dialogue and be tolerant of those with differing belief systems than your own. So we live in this pluralistic age, but we also live in an age that is deeply influenced by postmodernism. Now, postmodernism questions whether there's such a thing as truth at all, whether it's even a valid thing to claim truth, whether there is such a thing as absolute truth, or whether there are overarching meta narratives and universal values. It can feel invalid or even close minded to say that something is absolutely true. So postmodernism is highly influential, as is relativism. Relativism is distinct from postmodernism, but it is very much related. Relativism says that no religion is essentially more true than another. All religions are basically the same. And so we live in a time when people are not as concerned with what is true, and they're more concerned with what is my truth. Truth has very much become personalized. It has become relativized. And so this concept of relativism, I think, has become so popular, it has become the cultural default. So does it even matter what we believe? It's a question, I think, worth asking. Now, before we get there, I do think it's important that we ask simply how we got to this place culturally, because the reality is that religious dogmatism has historically been quite divisive and violent. And as a pastor, I don't get to dodge that. I have to look at that. I have to wrestle with that. I have to acknowledge that. And just to give a few examples of this. So in the 16th century, during the Swiss Reformation, 1525 in particular, in Zurich, the city council made the decision that rebaptism would be a capital offense, which means that if you rejected the doctrine of infant baptism and believed instead that adults could be baptized as believers in Jesus Christ, that this was actually an offense where you could be executed. And interestingly, that's what my church believes. We don't practice infant baptism. We practice believers' baptism. And so if I was living in Zurich in 1525, I could be executed for believing this. I mean, that's a pretty foreign thought for us today, but it was very real at this point in time. In fact, in 1527, a guy named Felix Manz was drowned in Zurich, and it was cynically referred to his as his third baptism, meaning that he was baptized as an infant, he was rebaptized as an adult, and he was baptized again when he was drowned in the river. Pretty unthinkable for us today, but it's an example of how religious dogmatism has led to violence. Give a few more examples. You have the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572. Catholics and Protestants in France were deeply divided, and thousands of Protestants were massacred after tensions boiled over. Violence began in Paris and it spread throughout the region, all kinds of violence and divisiveness. You see it again in the following century, in the 30 Years' War, in the 17th century. You had atrocities, to be sure, committed on all sides. The Catholic imperial forces at one time killed 20,000 mostly Protestant civilians there. Catholic churches were desecrated, whole communities were destroyed. And so you have plenty of examples, those are just a few, of how religious dogmatism has led to divisiveness and even violence. Now, it's important to note that it's not just there weren't just religious factors in play there. There were also political and economic factors involved as well. But it is an example of how beliefs can tend to divide people, and if that's not handled effectively, it can lead to divisiveness and tons of violence. Now, I think it should also be noted that it's not just the case in religion. We also see division in violence in politics today. In 2011, for instance, U.S. Representative Gabrielle Giffords was shot at a constituent event, leaving 6 dead and many injured. In 2023, there was an Ecuadorian presidential candidate who was assassinated while campaigning. Of course, most recently with Charlie Kirk's assassination. And so I think today there's this very understandable impulse of just can we all just get along? Like, can we just all be on the same page? And if beliefs divide us, like, let's just kind of set those aside. I mean, there's no wonder that you're not supposed to talk about religion and politics at the dinner table. But what I would say is that taking a hands off approach to our beliefs is not the answer at all. And the reason for this is that everyone has beliefs. Beliefs are inevitable. And religious people are not the only people capable of being dogmatic. I think this is an important point to point out here. Relativism can be just as dogmatic as religion. In fact, relativism, which certainly comes off with this, I think, desire to be tolerant and inclusive of people of other faiths. Well, when you say that there's no such thing as absolute truth, what you're really doing is you're making an absolute truth claim. You're saying it's absolutely true that there's no such thing as absolute truth. And so the potential for dogmatism never disappears. It's really just disguised. Saying that all religions are the same is just as dogmatic as saying that Jesus is the only way to God. So beliefs matter, and differing views don't necessarily have to lead to violence and discord. As a Christian, I think of Jesus' call, actually his command to believers, to love those who persecute them, to pray for those who persecute them, to love their enemies. You see, I don't think the answer is holding these vague, substance free beliefs, because I actually believe that civility is possible without turning off our brains entirely. In fact, I can't imagine a life that is truly purposeful, meaningful, impactful without carefully examining what it is we believe. We can't avoid this question. Our beliefs shape how we think, shape how we live, shape the decisions that we make, and so beliefs matter quite a bit. One of the reasons why I know this is because beliefs have consequences. The headlines make this clear in the news literally every day. You have violent acts of terrorism, assassinations, as we mentioned before, political killings. These are almost always influenced or fueled by a set of beliefs, whether political, ideological, or religious. And families, nations, and entire communities have been forever changed because of these beliefs. So our beliefs don't just rattle around in our minds, they end up influencing how we think, how we speak, how we act, and the decisions that we make. Now, that's not just true of negative things, it's also true in very positive things as well. Beliefs also inspire courage and hope. Take Nelson Mandela, for instance. How is it that he was able to endure 27 years in prison? How is it that Dietrich Bonhoeffer could stand up to the Nazis and give his life because of his beliefs? We wouldn't know their names apart from the power of belief. Beliefs don't just rattle around in our heads. They don't just stay in our heads. They show up in our words. They show up in our choices. They show up in our actions. Beliefs shape our reality. They shape real life. We have all those pressing questions that I talked about earlier about marriage and raising kids and money and work and all of that. But our beliefs shape all of those things, which is why I think it's very important that we're intentional and clear about what we believe. Now, one of my personal beliefs is that nothing is more important than what we believe about God and his son, Jesus Christ. In my mind, there is nothing more important than that. Now, all beliefs matter, but not all beliefs are equally important. For instance, I'm a baseball fan, and I don't hold my beliefs about MLB rules with the same weightiness as I do about my beliefs about God and about Jesus. The reason for that is because beliefs about baseball rules only really impact this life and a very small part of this life. But my beliefs about God impact eternity. The same could be said for certain political opinions or certain economic opinions or certain ways I might view diet and exercise and such. These things really do matter for this life. And in some cases, they have an eternal impact. But my beliefs about God and about his son, Jesus Christ, are of the utmost importance. What we believe about God impacts what we believe about our meaning, what we believe about purpose, significant morality, value, life after death. The most important things in this life are very much influenced by what we believe about God. And in fact, what we believe or don't believe about God inevitably influence all of these things. So I really do believe that beliefs matter. They shape us for good or for ill, and nothing is more important than what we believe about God. And so that's why in this podcast, we're going to be spending a lot of time clarifying, explaining, sharpening, at times even defending what we believe and getting at the heart at why we believe what we believe. We think it's a worthy pursuit. We think it's something worth investing a lot of time in because it ultimately shapes how we live life and how we follow Jesus. And so, friends, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. We created this podcast to help us stay awake and alert in our walk with Jesus. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.